Hey folks, welcome back. So this video here is going to be a little bit different. In most all of my past videos, I've done an intro into the video, what I was wanting to accomplish in that video, and then basically just brought you guys along for the ride. Well, this video here, I'm already about 80% done with what I wanted to accomplish with this video. So it's kind of more of a recap of what I've done. And my explanation for that is pretty simple. I just wasn't really jiving with the video or the content creation when I was starting to work on this. Just kind of couldn't get in the groove. Plus, I had a lot of stuff that I needed to accomplish. So just getting in there and getting to work was more important than worrying about getting a video started on it. So for the most part, I just got busy, got this, a lot of the stuff done that I wanted to accomplish. And here I am just kind of trying to catch up on it in video form. Now, before we get into this video and what I've actually done, I would like to shout out to all the new subscribers. So apparently old truck stuff is pretty popular. The last two videos with the recovery of the Transtar and then dragging that L9000 home has basically doubled my subscribers on YouTube here. So that's pretty cool. Thank you guys for subscribing to the channel. For those of you that did subscribe in hopes of seeing a lot of old truck stuff, that's not what this channel is really about. This channel is more of just what I'm doing and how I do it. So there is going to be plenty of old truck content, but not in this video. However, if you are interested in that, the next video, we're actually going to do quite a bit with the Peterbilt. I know I've said that before, but the bottom line is I'm getting to the point that I need to use that truck here in a couple of weeks, and I've got some stuff that I got to do to it. So in the next video, definitely for sure, we're going to do kind of a formal introduction to the 67 Peterbilt and what I do for annual maintenance and some of the upgrades or some of the stuff I'm going to look at doing on that truck. So if you're just here for old semi-truck stuff, maybe bounce back on the next video. This video here is monster truck stuff. Now, with that little bit out of the way, so what am I doing on the monster truck? In short, I need to have this truck ready to go for a show in Las Cruces, New Mexico, the end of this month. Or that is the tentative plan at this time. Now, you're probably thinking, what do you need to get done with this truck? I've already run it at several shows in 2025. I really haven't done anything, damaging to the truck or anything that I need to do a bunch of work on it. I've already got new lighter tires and wheels for it. Should be pretty much ready to go. However, I never really finished the truck before we started running it. So that's really what I'm trying to accomplish here. We took the truck, the first show was last summer, 2025. And we did 3 consecutive shows, followed by a 4th show, all in the same weekend. Then I did 1 show in Salem, and then finally in September, I did the final show that I did in 2025 over in Elko, not far from here. So all of those shows I have done, there have been little kind of nitpicky things that actually need to be completed on the truck. So prior to running the truck, we just took care of all of the, basically the items the truck needed to perform and the necessary safety equipment. Well, now I have that last, like that last 10% of things that a guy needs to use. And most of it is on like your tech card when they're looking at it and making sure you have everything on the truck. There's a couple of little things that they're not a safety item when it comes to the crowd. It's not a safety item as far as me and Allison in the truck. It's kind of more of a safety thing for the truck itself. Stuff to, keep the truck from getting damaged. For example, I needed Lexan covers over the batteries. That's just so something doesn't fall across the posts, short the batteries out, possibly catch the truck on fire. So I needed to do stuff like that. Also a fire suppression system. I needed to get that on the truck. Again, we're enclosed in the truck. So fire, as far as Alice and I in the truck, fire is not a huge danger because we have a full firewall, front and back. We have a windshield, we have a back windshield, and a full floor in the truck. For those that you were not here when we first ran the truck as a mega truck, you might not remember, but we actually had a pretty big fireball around the truck when we blew a head gasket. As far as myself and Allison in the truck, we didn't even really know that it was that serious until we actually got to see the video. It just simply wasn't a danger for us in the truck. However, it is on the tech card that you need to have a fire suppression system. So the truck needs to have a fire suppression system. And then there were a few other changes that I wanted to make myself. The fuel cell that was in the truck was one that I had built. It had an integrated hydraulic tank that was built into the fuel cell. And I wanted to change that stuff out that wasn't something that wasn't quite so custom. So if I were to have a problem with the fuel cell that was in the truck, you know, it could be very detrimental. It's not something that you're going to just quickly switch out or quickly repair and have the truck ready to go for the next show or the next day even. So what I wanted to do was take that system out and replace it with something that is more standard, you know, kind of more of a standard monster truck type piece. That way, if there was something that happened, I could have a spare in the trailer, or at the very least, it's just a phone call away in a couple of days to get a new one and have it ready for the next show, say the next week or the next month. Now, even though I really have not videoed a whole bunch of the stuff that I've done so far, I did, you know, do some of the stuff, time-lapse some of this stuff as I was doing it. The majority of this stuff that I've done in this video, you guys have already seen me do it quite a bit on this channel. A lot of, you know, just CNC router work, a lot of welding, fabrication, and just generally making stuff fit. That's not something that's, you know, good for long form content. So I did set up a camera, got a little bit of, you know, time-lapse, mostly time-lapse footage of some of that stuff that I was doing. And I'm just going to insert that, kind of poke it in here as I describe what I'm doing. So it'll be kind of a voiceover of that time-lapse. We'll just see how this goes, how this whole video fits together. Might be something I do more later, or it might be something that I just kind of get totally away from in future videos. So where we're going to start here is just basically go in order of what I've done on the rig, why I did it, and we'll just take a look at it here. So the first thing I decided to do was take care of the fire suppression system. Like I said earlier, this cab is fully enclosed, so it's not really a huge danger for any kind of a real, just a short flash fire. We're probably going to be okay. It's probably not a huge deal. If there is something that catches on fire and decides to linger a little bit, I'm able to pull the pin, squeeze the handle, and it's actually plumbed in to a nozzle back here in the back of the cab. And I have that nozzle pointed right down in this area where it is probably the most prone for this truck to catch on fire if it does. Transmission fires, torque converter fires, stuff like that seem to be probably the most common in monster truck, mega truck, actually probably any real big horsepower applications. If it's making big power and you're making heat in the transmission, it's pretty easy to catch the thing on fire if it starts pushing fluid out of it. Now, on top of the fire suppression system, the way I would initially avoid a transmission fire is by running a fluid that has a higher flash point. Your typical non-synthetic ATF has a flash point of about 220 degrees. So by the time it gets hot enough and it's pushing that oil out from temperature, it's already at the flash point. So when it hits one of those headers that's smoking hot, instantly you have it flash on fire. The oil I run in my transmission is an equivalent to John Deere High Guard, and that has a flash point of about 400. I believe it's over 400 degrees anyway. So right off the bat, I'm nearly doubling the flash point, so that helps quite a bit. But just in case, we do now have this fire suppression system. This was a custom bracket I built to fit this bottle in here, and the rest of it's just your typical fire suppression system plumbing. Nothing too special there. And the next thing that docked me on my tech card at the last show I was at was blower restraints. So you have to have a blow-off valve, which I actually have a pop-off valve here on the back of the manifold, aluminum studs, so that way if it backfires and decides to lift the blower, this will break away instead of turning your manifold into a shrapnel-filled bomb of any kind. And on top of that, so if it blows these studs off, you need to restrain the blower. So that's why I have these blower restraints now. I didn't have them before. Really, technically, at 10% overdrive, you're probably never going to lift that blower anyway. If it doesn't break the blower belt, you have throttle cables, you have fuel lines, you have a lot of stuff that's actually going to keep the blower from leaving the truck. It wasn't like it was a danger that it was going to go into the crowd or hurt somebody on the track. Again, this is more kind of safety for the truck, just to keep all my parts and pieces in place. On top of that, if I was running this thing at 40% overdriven, had a gnarly backfire, and it blew this thing right off the engine, it's probably not going to go anywhere through all that cage work. It physically can't fit out there anywhere. But now we do have blower restraints, so I'm good on the tech card there. Next up, I had mentioned I needed a Lexpan panel over the top of my batteries. So this turned into a little bit of a project just because I decided to change battery types. So I went with a battery that had these recessed posts, and by doing that, that made it really simple to just sandwich this piece of Lexan in between my battery hold down and the battery itself. So now nothing can get across here and short these out. Now that's really not a huge project. It's actually pretty easy to do. I just had to change to a different style battery. I did have to shorten my battery hold down posts here on both sides. But then I also added a couple of Deutz connectors back here in the back. And the reason I did that was most of your monster trucks you're going to see out there have an onboard battery charger. So they're mounted somewhere in the truck, and when they're sitting between shows or between rounds, they actually plug the trucks in, and they are, kind of topping off the batteries with the battery charger, so you're not solely relying on an alternator. Well, I really didn't have a great place to put a battery charger in this truck, so what I ended up doing was actually putting my battery charger in this box, and I can simply pull the cords out and plug them in and have the box right out here with the truck. So that was another part of that project. This battery charger is mounted in this box, and I even have room for my jump pack there. So now, if we're going to charge the batteries in between rounds or in between shows, you can simply throw the box under the truck, hook the stuff up, plug it in, and it's charging. One of the things that you see once in a while is you'll see a truck go ripping out on the track, and it looks like it's got a tail because it's dragging the extension cord. You know the pit guy forgot to unplug the truck before they took off. I've seen that a couple of times. I'd have to mess up pretty bad to drag my whole box around with me. I have to step over it to get in the truck. And while I was under here, I had another little guard that I needed to build, and this actually isn't quite finished yet. I'm very close to being done with this one. Get you guys a little bit of light under here. So in between the back of my transmission and my transfer case, there is a coupler in between there, and I had to build this guard for it. So that coupler, that thing's actually pretty beefy. I don't think I've ever seen one broken, but there's a reason they want that guarded. That means somebody has broke that thing before, probably thrown chunks out from under the truck. So I needed to add this guard. The rest of, all the rest of my drive lines and U-joints, everything's guarded really well. So I just simply built this 1/8" steel guard. It goes over the coupler here. And the only thing I have left to do is I have to build some fancy nuts that fit that slot in the transmission mount, and I can bolt that guard down to it. That I'm going to be machining a pair of those nuts out a little bit later on as I'm doing some other machine work. Now this is the fuel cell that I was talking about earlier, and this part of the project is where the work really started. So this particular tank here was custom built to fit in that chassis. And the way, if you look at it, it's odd shape. It fit in there with the shock hoops. This front angle is sloped back. I was trying to get a lot of fuel in that truck, be able to put most of a 55-gallon drum of methanol, and have a couple of 5-gallon jugs on hand to top it off when need be. It worked great. Everything worked well. This right here, you can see this weld up the side. This is a whole separate tank here. It has its own outlet, its own fill, its own rollover vent valve here. This was the hydraulic steering tank. So this portion of the tank itself held about 4 gallons of hydraulic oil, and that was for the front steering only. This half over here obviously is the fuel cell. Had a rollover vent valve, fill, have your return lines for the mechanical injection, and then the pickup. Now this pickup, I might have mentioned this in earlier videos, but this pickup, this tube here actually goes to the back of the tank. It goes straight back along here. So the pickup, it's actually picking up fuel about 1.5 inches in from right here. Now the biggest reason I want to get away from this particular fuel tank is because I have broken enough aluminum tanks and had to repair them, you know, from jumping. When you jump, you come down, you land. When that fuel sloshes, that fuel comes free falling out of the air and just slaps in this tank. It's brutal on this stuff. It will blow these seams out. This tank here is actually built out of 3/16 thick aluminum. I knew it was going to take some abuse, so I made it extra heavy duty. And on top of being extra heavy duty, I had actually planned on filling this thing completely full with your standard wiffle balls. So the plastic that the wiffle balls are made of, according to my Google searching, is compatible with methanol. So the methanol will not break down the plastic that the balls are made out of. What I did find though is wiffle balls to get an official wiffle ball so you know you're getting the right material. They're actually not nearly as cheap as a guy would think. I mean, granted, they're not super expensive, but you need a lot of them to fill this tank up. I had bought 12 dozen, so that is 144 wiffle balls. They cost me over $200, and it would have filled this tank up about to that line. I would have needed about 3 times the amount of wiffle balls that I had on hand. On top of that, you're gonna have to go in, one side of the wiffle ball is solid. I would have to go in and drill one side of each one of those balls just to make sure that it wasn't sitting in there like a cup or a bowl holding methanol in there. You'd have to make sure that those wiffle balls drained fuel out. You're gonna have to put enough in here that you're gonna basically pack them in there tightly so they don't move, and it's gonna prevent that sloshing of fuel. I really think if you wanted to go that route, if I absolutely wanted to run this tank, spend the money, get enough wiffle balls to pack them in there and control that fuel, I don't think I would ever have a problem breaking that tank. I might not anyway with the 3/16 walls, but you can't be too safe when you're talking about the fuel. Now, even if I did that, I had one other issue that I wasn't going to get around, and that is how I set up the pickup. Kind of my theory on it, picking up back here, is originally when the truck was going to be a mega truck, it was going to be, you know, we're more concerned about acceleration. So you're going to go out there, you're going to mack that thing flat to the floor. As the truck takes off, as the fuel gets lower, it's going to have a tendency to go to the back of the tank to where the pickup is. And that's what I wanted. And then actually that pickup tube where it's at in the tank there is, I believe it's 1.5 inch tubing, might be 1.25 inch tubing. I don't remember. It's been a while since I built it. But the plan there was it would pick up fuel here at the back of the fuel tank. But as you slam on the brakes, there would be enough fuel in that pickup tube kind of to act as a reservoir so that the engine wouldn't lean out and die if you were under braking, you know, quick deceleration. We'll just call it that. Now, if you've watched any of the videos where I've run this truck at the show, I'm kind of a fan of doing the stoppies right now. I'm kind of enjoying playing with that. So we're getting pretty comfortable with putting the truck on its nose. With the truck being on its nose, having the pickup back here is not a very good deal. Granted, theoretically, having that tube in there to act as a reservoir, as I'd mentioned before, should help cushion that a little bit. And I haven't had a problem yet, but it's only a matter of time as our stoppies or the nose wheelies or the moonwalk, whatever you want to call them, it's only a matter of time until those get long enough that this is going to create a problem. And if there's ever a time that I do not want to have instant throttle or instant acceleration, I dang sure don't want to. I don't want to miss out on that when I'm standing on my nose. So we had to make this change. So we'll go look at what I've put in the truck and kind of go over what I had to do there. So now what we've got in the truck is a Jazz fuel cell. And to actually fit this fuel tank, this fuel cell here, into the chassis wasn't a big deal. I just had to simply build a tray that sat in the chassis where that aluminum fuel cell sat, provide mounting points for the straps that hold the fuel tank in place, and then redo a little bit of the plumbing. So it wasn't really a big deal. This fuel cell here came with a pickup tube on one side and a rollover vent valve on the other side. So I kept this rollover vent valve. It is plumbed in to this hose, which comes back here to a breather. This pickup I changed out for another rollover vent valve, added the same hose to another breather. So we've got dual breathers. So it's very easy for air to displace the fuel that is used in the tank. Now, as far as pickups, I actually added a number 12 bulkhead fitting in the bottom of the tank. We'll look at that underneath the fuel tank here in a minute. And then that hose right there is the return hose from my mechanical fuel injection. And that's just simply a bulkhead connector that I've added to the top of the tank here. Now, before we look at the bottom of the tank, I just wanted to kind of show you on these vent hoses. I've got them looped up to the front here, and then they come back and actually go into the bottom of that filter. So that filter is just keeping, when it displaces the fuel with air, it's just not pulling dirt and grime and grit into my fuel cell. That's just filtering the air going through there. I've got them looped forward. So if we're doing something like a slap wheelie, and say we have this thing vertical enough and the fuel level is high enough that it's actually trying to come out that. I know that's a rollover vent valve, so it has a check ball in it to stop anything from coming out. But it's a steel ball, it doesn't float, so there is a possibility that it could get a little splashed fuel to come up out that fitting. But as it loops forward, this is the highest point. So it's not very likely to get very much fuel to come out of that tank. And if it does, once you come back down level, you're going to get just a splash of fuel out this. It's probably not even going to make it out the breather. And as it displaces the fuel with air, it'll probably actually pull most of that, vent it back up into the tank. Now I've got these clear back here in this position for the same reason, just like when we're doing the stop or the nose wheelies, these are now the highest point. So even if we're vertical and it's trying to get a little bit of fuel to come out that vent valve, that rollover valve there, it's not going to come out this because that's the highest point. Now I'm going to try and show you what's going on the bottom of the tank. So pretty simple. You can see that black plate. That's the steel tray that I built that has the fuel cell mounts, everything going on there. The fuel cell can sit on it. And then you can see where I've added that bulkhead connector to where my fuel pickup is. Now on the original tank, on the front of the pickup on the front of the tank, I actually had this fuel shutoff valve with an Enderley fuel filter was threaded directly onto the front of that tank. So this whole assembly was actually mounted on the tank. So what I had to do was come back and spend quite a bit of time building this bracket that actually bolts onto existing mounts here on the chassis, and then just basically made it so that this whole assembly now mounts to the chassis and then is plumbed in from the fuel tank there, comes over and goes to the mechanical pump. And I just kind of lucked out with this mounting stuff. So all of these hardline clamps, tube clamps, you can see on the other side of the chassis there. When I put these mounts on, I had drilled and tapped the top of them. And my original plan, the original reasoning for that was when it was going to be a mud truck, I was going to, put in stuff to keep the mud from getting up here in your blower drive and all of this stuff up front of the engine. Basically just tin work to keep the mud and slop out. Well, I don't really need that on the monster truck. So these holes actually come in handy to add stuff that I wasn't planning on later on. And now for the other half of the equation. As I'd mentioned, the other fuel tank had a hydraulic tank built into it. So I had to figure out something there. So I had seen these really cool steering reservoirs from Radial Dynamics. And I deal with Eric Amato at Radial Dynamics a bit with my rear steer stuff. So I reached out to him for one of these really gnarly steering reservoirs. So if you go check out, actually has a video on these steering reservoirs. He has a video where he fills that thing with oil, sets it up on a pump, and moves that reservoir all over the place. And that thing does not cavitate, does not suck air, doesn't cause your pump to cavitate because this thing sucks air. It's a really neat piece. I haven't looked into it to see how come it works so good. I'm just going to trust him. I got it mounted in there. The mounting is actually part of the tray that holds the fuel cell. So getting that mounted was super easy, just pretty much bolting it in. Plumbing it in was a little bit of a different story. So we'll start here on the pickup side, or the suction side of this reservoir. So all of my plumbing originally was number 16 JIC, and the suction or the pickup in this reservoir is number 20. I don't have any number 20 suction stuff on hand, so I simply took a number 20 cap and TIG welded a number 16 male JIC fitting to it. Easy peasy. That was, I'm sure I could have bought one of those fittings, but I had this stuff on hand. So that was pretty easy to do. Simply shortened up my existing suction line. Get you guys out here where you can see the whole thing. Clean and tidy, nice and short. Shouldn't have any issues with that. Now I've got you guys back over here at the original tank just to show you. These two fittings were my return fittings for the hydraulic system, for the front steer hydraulic system. So this is where the original return line went into the tank. It was just my return line come up the chassis, simple 90-degree JIC threaded right in here. Then I had a 3/4 pipe nipple here with the relief valve was actually mounted directly on the tank. And then there was a number 8 JIC fitting coming from teed in between the pressure port on the pump. So anytime the pump went to relief, it simply pushed the relief open, returning back to tank. So I had to do some changing there. So over here on this reservoir, there was only one fitting that was actually big enough to return to. So yeah, there's a 1/4-inch pipe plug here, but that's not big enough to return anything to. There is a number 16, or actually it's a number 12, male JIC is the return port. I had to get both the return from the relief valve and my return line had to go back in that one fitting. So what I ended up doing was taking a 3/4-inch pipe T. That's not focusing very well, but that 3/4-inch pipe T threads into the back of this relief valve. I machined the end down and threaded it for a number 8 JIC, and then I TIG welded a female swivel number 12 on that side. So a little bit of a challenge, but it all worked out. It turned out really pretty clean as far as plumbing. I didn't even have to change that hose there. It swung over nice and clean. I did end up changing this hose right here, but that was easy enough. That pretty much wrapped up most of the plumbing. I did have this step plate out of the way so that I could get the fuel cell, the original fuel cell out, get all of this stuff done and remounted in there. And then also, obviously, add my breather filters there. But since I had it off, I went ahead and added a little bit of wiring, and we installed these really cool lighted buggy whips. Now, I'm not really a huge lighted buggy whip guy. I have to work on them enough at work as it is. But I think that's something that the kids will like. If the kids like it, maybe it'll sell a few shirts. We'll see how that goes. I think they look good. When they're all lit up, they look really pretty good. Best rod ends in the world right there. Now, I think the last thing that I got dinged on my tech card was the guards for these reservoir caps. Now, I don't really think that this was a danger in any of the shows we did last year because we simply aren't jumping the truck hard enough to actually blow one of these caps off. However, we might grow into it, and it's a requirement to have this stuff on here for safety. So we got to get them on there. You could have this one blow off down on the ground here. Could have this one blow off, go through the hood of the truck. That wouldn't be so good. So what most trucks that I've seen have is a thin piece of tubing, like a piece of exhaust tube or maybe driveline tube. They split it in half so it cups around the shock body. And then they've got a tab that comes out and goes around, just a flat plate with a hole in it and a couple of gussets. And then that whole assembly pretty much just typically hose clamps onto the shock body. Well, this truck really isn't a exhaust pipe and hose clamp type of truck. So what I've got going on over here is some billet aluminum clamps that I'm building. So we've got these pieces here. These are pretty much fresh off of the CNC router. And this bore right here fits that shock body. And this bore right here goes around that billet cap. There will be a pinch bolt that goes through here. So this side will be drilled and tapped. This side will be drilled and countersunk for an Allen head bolt that will pinch those two together around the shock body. And there's no way I'm going to be able to do this one-handed, but I can do one half one-handed. You'll have an idea what's going on there. So I can put this piece on just like this, clamp it on there, and it should be good. These are what I'm finishing up now. I actually tried getting a hold of Keith Berry to buy another set of these, and I was just going to buy a set of those, clamp them on there and be done. But I guess he doesn't make those for this style shock anymore. It was going to be like a custom order or something. As far as custom orders go, I can do that myself. So we've got 4 of those done there. I've got these 4 here that still need deburred. And then I've got this material over here. This is how they start. Just drops of 3/4 inch 60-61. So I have to have 16 total. I've got 8 done. I need to do 8 more. And the first 4 that I showed you, I run the program to where it cuts the part out and it can deburr one side, and then I deburr the other side by hand. So you can see these ones here actually need deburred still. On this side, I think what I'm going to do is build a fixture so I can deburr those in the machine as well. But that is for next days off. I'm going to knock those out, get that stuff so I can get those installed prior to getting started on the Peterbilt. Also, I guess honorable mention in this video is I've been messing around with the transmissions a little bit, C6 stuff. So this is actually my dad's C6 transmission for his truck. But the only reason I've got that stuff out here is because I was kind of in the C6 mode. I have a 100% complete C6 that's ready to go for this truck. It's out on the other side of the shop. Pretty much got to get it loaded in the trailer. I will have a spare transmission 100% ready to go for the next show. Also, I picked up another 19 145, 20 145, 21 145, whatever you want to call it. Basically all the same thing. That one right there is exactly the same thing as what's in the truck currently. Same gear ratio, same spline count. It's pretty much ready to go. I'm going to get a flange for it so I can do caliper mount, all of that stuff, and have it 100% ready to go. I could bolt this in the truck right now. If we don't end up using it the first couple of shows, we might do a video on putting that Detroit no spin in that differential. I have also begun doing the critical measuring on the next engine for this truck. So it's just going to be basically identical to this engine with the exception of a slightly different camshaft, a slightly bigger camshaft, slightly more compression, but outside of that, they're going to be super, super similar. I'm basically just getting started on doing all the critical measuring, your oil clearances, rod main journal clearances, checking deck height, everything there. It's out in the assembly room. Probably won't do any video on that because what do we do? Like a 2 or 3 or 4 part video on the engine that's in the truck. And this is just going to be a bunch of the repeat of the same stuff. But by probably springtime, I will have an engine that's ready to go on the truck if we need one in an emergency. Well, I think that pretty much brings you up to speed with what's going on the truck, what I've gotten done. And like I said, the next video will be about getting the Peterbilt ready to go for this next show. It's about a 1,000-mile drive, I believe, one way for us to go from here to Las Cruces. So I need to make sure that that truck is ready to go. It's got to get pretty much a full PM. Oil change, check all the fluids in the boxes, check the brakes, adjust the brakes, grease everything. So maybe we'll do a formal introduction to that truck and kind of a quick service video on that thing. I've got a few things that I need to do to the trailer too, and if we have time, we might look into that on that video. But that's pretty much going to do it. I've got about 4 days to get everything ready to go for the next show. My next days off, I'll have 4 days off. The days off after that will be the show that we have to have the truck at. So not a lot of time, quite a bit of work, but I think we've got it covered. As for this video, that's going to do her. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.